You know, when you picture the Dominican Republic, your mind probably goes straight to pristine beaches or maybe those massive resorts in Punta Cana, right?
Oh, definitely. Or maybe the booming agricultural exports, coffee, sugar, things like that.
Exactly. You definitely don't picture a multi-billion-dollar, hyper-industrialized mining boom. But today, we're taking a deep dive into a really comprehensive investigative report. It's titled The Cost of Gold: Mining Impacts in the Dominican Republic.
It is a fascinating report, and our mission for this deep dive is to, well, look way past those glittering export numbers you see on paper to uncover the real balance sheet here.
Right. We want to measure the macroeconomic wins against the multi-generational environmental and social costs. And, figure out who is really capturing the wealth beneath the soil. Okay, let's unpack this. Because reading through these national export statistics, it can feel a bit like looking at the balance sheet of a flashy Las Vegas casino.
That is a perfect analogy, actually.
Yeah, like the revenue numbers on the front end look absolutely incredible. But to understand the actual math of how the house operates, you have to go into the back rooms, right? You have to see exactly who is paying the price for that success on the factory floor.
Exactly. And that tension between the front-of-house profits and the backroom costs
Hmm.
is really what defines this entire industry, especially since 2012, specifically with the opening of the Pueblo Viejo mine.
That's the really big one.
Oh, yeah. It's located in the province of Sanchez Ramirez, and it happens to be one of the largest gold deposits on the planet. Its opening rapidly turned the Dominican Republic into a top Latin American producer.
Wow. One of the largest on the planet.
Yeah, the stakes here are monumental. What we are looking at is this high-stakes collision. On one side, you have rapid, massive revenue generation for the state.
Right.
But on the other side, you have the permanent physical alteration of the ecosystems of an island nation.
Which is heavy. But let's start with that revenue engine, because those economic triumphs are, well, they're exactly what propels this entire industry forward. And honestly, the sheer scale of the money is hard to ignore.
It really is staggering when you look at the raw data.
Yeah, like in 2022, mining exports hit just over 2 billion US dollars. That is almost 15% of the country's entire national exports. And gold alone accounted for about 1.6 billion of that.
And the domestic footprint of those exports is substantial, too. I mean, mining contributes about 2.3% to the national GDP.
Which is huge for one sector.
Right. And in 2022 alone, it generated roughly 620 million US dollars in tax revenue. Just to give you some context on the leverage the state can occasionally exercise, there was a major contract renegotiation back in 2013.
Oh, right, the protests.
Exactly. The public actually took to the streets in mass protest because the original terms were seen as incredibly unfavorable to the country. And following that renegotiation, the Pueblo Viejo mine alone paid over 400 million US dollars to the state in just the year 2021.
But wait, if you're listening to this, you might naturally assume that, hey, if an industry makes up 15% of national exports, it must be employing half the country, right?
That would be the logical assumption, yeah.
You'd think it must be this massive engine of daily jobs for regular people, but the reality in the report is completely paradoxical. Pueblo Viejo employs about 2,500 people directly and maybe 10,000 indirectly.
Mhm.
In a country with a national workforce of around 5 million people, that is barely a drop in the bucket. It's like building a state-of-the-art, highly automated bank vault right in the middle of a rural town.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah, there is a massive amount of wealth inside the building, but hardly anyone locally actually gets a job working there or, ever gets to touch the money.
And the reason for that is because modern metallic mining is fundamentally capital-intensive, not labor-intensive. They aren't hiring thousands of local workers with shovels and pickaxes anymore.
Right, it's not the gold rush.
Exactly. They are importing billions of dollars in heavy machinery, autonomous trucks, and highly specialized chemical processing plants. But what's really fascinating here is the economic ripple effect this creates across the rest of the country. It's something economists call the Dutch disease.
I saw that term in the report. How exactly does a gold mine in the Caribbean catch a Dutch disease? Like, what is the actual mechanism there?
So it's a phenomenon tied to currency exchange. When you have a sudden, massive influx of foreign currency, in this case, billions of US dollars entering the country from gold exports, it actually artificially strengthens the local Dominican peso.
Okay, but on paper, a strong national currency sounds like a victory, doesn't it?
It sounds great on paper, but in practice, it makes the country's other vital sectors much more expensive for the rest of the world.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, suddenly a hotel room in Punta Cana or agricultural exports or manufactured goods from the free trade zones, they all cost more on the international market.
Wow. So this hyper-efficient wealth generator in the mining sector can inadvertently suffocate tourism and agriculture. And those are the industries that actually employ millions of everyday citizens.
Precisely. The very thing making the country look wealthy on paper is slowly making its biggest employers less globally competitive.
That is wild. Okay, so if the industry isn't providing mass employment and it's actively distorting the broader economy, we have to look at the physical footprint. What exactly is this industry leaving behind in the dirt? Because you mentioned specialized chemicals earlier, and the extraction process itself sounds intense.
Intense is an understatement.
Hmm.
To get the gold out of the rock at Pueblo Viejo, they use a chemical process involving massive amounts of cyanide and lime.
Cyanide. It's out in the open.
Yeah, because the gold isn't sitting there in shiny nuggets you can just pick up. It's microscopic.
Yeah.
So they have to crush entire mountains into dust, literally, and then use cyanide to chemically separate the gold particles from that dust.
And what happens to all that cyanide-laced dust afterward?
What is left behind are millions of tons of highly toxic, acidic residue. This sludge is pumped into massive artificial lakes called tailings dams.
Right, tailings dams.
And the risk of those dams failing isn't just theoretical. In 2015, a transport pipe burst, spilling cyanide-laced mud directly into the Margajita River.
Oh, man.
And this is a tributary of the Una River, which is a vital watershed for local agriculture and drinking water. Later studies actually detected heavy metals like mercury, lead, and arsenic downstream at levels exponentially higher than permissible limits.
And it isn't just gold extraction doing this, right? The report details operations by Falcondo, which is backed by the transnational Glencore, extracting ferronickel in Bonao.
Yes, the ferronickel operations are incredibly destructive in a different way.
They use these massive, highly polluting oil furnaces, and the landscape they leave behind is described in the report as orange deserts, because they strip away the humid forests, and then the heavy machinery and chemical changes compact the soil so densely that it basically bakes in the sun.
It becomes completely lifeless. Water just runs right off it, causing flash floods instead of soaking into the earth like it naturally would.
And the biodiversity threat is expanding across the country, too. In Pedernales, bauxite mining is encroaching on the Sierra de Bajoruco Biosphere Reserve.
Right, and in the San Juan River Basin, there is a proposed project by a company called GoldQuest, known as the Romero Project.
Yeah, they are targeting deposits situated right underneath the cloud forests, aren't they?
Exactly. And if that excavation goes forward, it threatens critical watersheds and highly vulnerable endemic species. We're talking about local parrots and the solenodon, which is this rare, ancient mammal native only to the island.
It's not just the massive corporate mines either. Even non-metallic mining, like sand and gravel extraction for construction, frequently happens with zero oversight. They're literally carving massive craters into the landscape and completely diverting riverbeds.
It's a very loosely regulated free-for-all in some areas.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Or maybe terrifying is the better word, because the report focuses heavily on this concept of eternal liabilities.
Yes, that is a crucial term to understand.
I think the general public assumes a mine opens, the company takes the gold, they close up shop, and then they, I don't know, plant some pine trees and walk away. But the reality of acid mine drainage is so much darker.
It is a geological nightmare, frankly.
Right. When you blast open the earth and expose these deep sulfide rocks to oxygen and rainwater, it creates a natural chemical reaction that produces sulfuric acid. And that acid will just continue to leach heavy metals into the groundwater for centuries after the mine closes.
Right.
Centuries.
Long after the companies are gone.
Exactly. And despite the companies having formal legal closure plans on paper, the state simply lacks the billions of dollars and technical capacity to step in and manage a toxic water treatment plant forever if a company were to just, say, declare bankruptcy and abandon the site.
And that really exposes the profound illusion of remediation. Mining companies do execute remediation plans. They pour concrete, they stabilize the eroded soil, they plant fast-growing vegetation.
They make it look green again.
They do. But a complex, ancient ecosystem like a Caribbean cloud forest cannot simply be replanted like rolling out turf on a golf course.
Right, it's not just grass.
No, a cloud forest relies on precise layers of canopy, specific epiphyte plants that capture moisture straight from the fog, and deep, spongy soil biology that took thousands of years to form. Once you dig that up and chemically alter the bedrock, the hydrological cycles are permanently broken. The landscape is fundamentally changed forever.
But toxic runoff and broken hydrological cycles don't just stay neatly within the boundaries of a nature reserve, right? Eventually, that contaminated water from the Margajita River makes its way downstream to the people living there, which means environmental destruction inevitably becomes a human health crisis.
It does, and the localized data is deeply concerning. In the town of Cotuí, which sits right near the Pueblo Viejo mine, communities have documented a cluster of anencephaly.
That's a birth defect, right?
Yes, it's a tragic congenital condition where babies are born missing parts of their brain and skull. Furthermore, an independent university study took samples and found elevated levels of lead in the blood of children living in these adjacent mining zones.
Now, it's really important to note how fiercely contested this is in the report. Because while local families and their community doctors look at the timeline and point directly to the mining chemicals as the obvious culprit, the mining company, PVDC, strictly denies any link whatsoever.
Right, they absolutely deny it.
They maintain their operations and containment systems are entirely safe. And crucially, the Ministry of Health has not stepped in to conduct or release definitive, independent epidemiological studies that prove the mine is the direct cause of these specific clusters. We have to look at all sides here.
We do. But that lack of state intervention leaves a massive void. Because even without definitive government proof, the sheer uncertainty generates paralyzing anxiety for a parent living next to a tailings dam.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
And the human cost isn't limited to physical health either. There's also the raw reality of geographic displacement.
Oh, you mean the land seizures?
Yes. In order for Pueblo Viejo to expand its massive open pit, the government literally declared the lands of rural communities like El Cercado and La Sigua to be of public utility. Agricultural families were forced to relocate against their will.
So they just lose everything.
They didn't just lose their houses. They lost their ancestral farmlands, their generational social networks, and really their entire economic way of life.
It's hard to imagine agricultural families just quietly packing up their ancestral lands because the government signed a piece of paper. There has to be massive friction there. People must be pushing back, right?
The friction is immense, and it's highly organized. Remember that proposed Romero project in the Clab forests we discussed earlier?
Yeah, the Gold Quest one.
Right. It sparked a massive unified social uprising, a coalition movement called San Juan Sin Mina, which means San Juan without a mine, brought together local farmers, the Catholic Church, environmental NGOs, and everyday citizens.
Wow, quite the coalition.
And they have fiercely and successfully blocked the exploration permits for years now. It has transcended a local dispute to become a national symbol in the Dominican Republic of a community's fundamental right to simply say no to extractivism.
So what does this all mean for a local family caught in the middle of this? I mean, imagine you are living in one of these mining towns. You are facing an impossible choice.
It really is an impossible position.
On one hand, you are risking the forceful loss of your farmland, the potential heavy metal contamination of your drinking water, and agonizing anxiety over your children's health. But on the other hand, these exact same mining companies will often roll into town and build a brand new elementary school, or pave the main road, or construct a modern health clinic that the local government had neglected for decades. How are they supposed to weigh that?
It forces communities into a deeply compromised position, for sure. And it revolves around a concept the industry calls the social license to operate.
Social license, okay.
Companies like PVDC and Falcondo do indeed finance roads, aqueducts, and schools. They present this as a commitment to shared prosperity.
Which sounds nice.
But critics and sociologists strongly argue that these infrastructure projects should not be viewed as corporate charity. They are legally mandated compensations that represent a fraction of the profits. And more importantly, they are strategically deployed as leverage to fracture community solidarity, neutralize local opposition, and basically quiet the protests.
Wow. Okay, so we've measured the massive macroeconomic cash against the permanent environmental destruction and the heavy social toll. Now we have to answer the ultimate question. Where does all this wealth actually pool?
That is the big question.
Right. If we follow the money generated from this pulverized rock, who is sitting at the very top of the ledger.
Well, if we look at the distribution of the value generated, the top tier is entirely dominated by transnationals and their global shareholders.
Surprise, surprise.
Right. Barrick and Newmont, the partners operating Pueblo Viejo, capture an estimated 60 to 70% of the free cash flow after royalties and taxes are paid.
60 to 70%.
Yeah. And Glencore absorbs the massive high-profit margins of ferronickel when global markets spike. Even junior exploration companies like Gold Quest see their stock values skyrocket on the Toronto Stock Exchange just on the news of securing exploration permits.
Wait, so they make money without even mining?
Exactly, meaning their investors generate immense wealth without the company actually mining a single ounce of gold.
So the absolute lion's share of the wealth leaves the island before the dust even settles. What about the central government, though? They are getting hundreds of millions in tax revenue.
The state is the second tier. They do capture significant capital. But the critical structural flaw here is that the Dominican Republic lacks a sovereign wealth fund. In countries like Norway, resource wealth is invested in a locked fund for long-term transformational development. But in the DR, this massive temporary boom of cash is quickly absorbed into short-term government spending. It pays for current expenses and just evaporates into the annual state budget to keep the government running.
And according to the report, it gets even murkier at the local level. By law, 5% of the state's mining royalties are supposed to be directed specifically to the municipalities where the extraction happens, right? Places like Cotuí and Bono.
That's what the law says, yes.
But the actual distribution of that money is notoriously slow and highly opaque.
The opacity is the defining feature here. The local wealth that is generated rarely reaches the displaced farmers. Instead, it pools among local elites and well-connected business owners who manage to secure lucrative secondary service contracts for the mine.
Like what kind of contracts?
Supplying things like heavy transport, private security, or catering for the camps.
Got it. And it is vital to be objective about the legal reality here, based on the sources we have. The report clearly states there are currently no specific legal convictions for mining corruption in the country.
That is an important distinction to make.
Yeah, we have to be clear on that. However, the extreme opacity of these municipal contracts, combined with the broader regional history of Odebrecht-style kickbacks and commissions for public works, well, it creates a deeply high-risk environment for clientelism and political favoritism. The system is structurally opaque, which invites backroom dealing, even if we can't point to a specific guilty verdict today.
And that structural reality is exactly what civil society groups are fighting against. To round out who captures the wealth, the final tier consists of the specialized professionals.
Right, the actual workers.
Well, the Dominican mid-level managers, engineers, and technicians working at the mines do receive premium above average pay compared to the rest of the country. But the very top executive roles, the ones directing the operation and making the highest salaries, are almost exclusively held by foreign expats.
Okay, let me visualize this mechanism. Because the best way to understand this economy isn't a pyramid, it's a centrifuge.
A centrifuge, I like that.
Yeah, it's a machine spinning incredibly fast. The heaviest, most valuable elements, the billions in free cash flow and dividends, they are immediately spun outward across the globe to transnational shareholders. Meanwhile, the crushed rock, the toxic water, and the displaced communities, well, they remain trapped right in the center of the machine.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, economists have a specific formal term for that exact centrifuge dynamic. They call it an extractive enclave.
Extractive enclave.
Yes, the wealth is exported rapidly and irreversibly. But the ecological debt, the poisoned rivers, the heavily eroded mountains, the centuries of acid mine drainage, that debt remains permanently attached to the territory.
Wow.
When civil society groups run the comprehensive numbers and factor in all those externalized costs, they conclude that the net balance for the Dominican nation as a whole is ultimately deeply negative.
So to bring this all together for you listening, the mining industry in the Dominican Republic is, without question, an incredibly efficient machine. It is fantastic at generating rapid foreign exchange and huge spikes in tax revenue for the state budget.
Undeniably efficient.
But its current operational model relies entirely on externalizing its true costs. It pushes the multi-generational environmental and social bill onto the local communities who have the least power to fight back. And honestly, a deep dive into a report like this completely changes the way you have to look at global supply chains.
It really makes you think twice about everyday items.
Exactly, because the microscopic gold sitting inside the circuit board of the smartphone in your pocket or the copper wiring running through the walls of your house, it carries this exact ledger of hidden local costs. It's not just a sterile commodity on a spreadsheet, it's a physical piece of a very complicated, very painful reality for communities thousands of miles away.
It raises a profoundly difficult question, and it leaves us with a lingering dilemma regarding those eternal liabilities we discussed earlier. If a mine's toxic runoff and ecological damage are chemically guaranteed to last for centuries, but the valuable metals are entirely extracted and exported in just a few short decades, How do we even begin to accurately price an environmental debt that will ultimately have to be paid by generations of citizens who haven't even been born yet?